Antoine Leblanc, the Morristown Murderer. Antoine Leblanc was born in the 1800s, a French immigrant to the United States. He went to New York to seek his fortune after being disowned by his family in France. He spoke little to no English and committed the crime only a few weeks after he arrived in the United States in April of 1833. After 3 days in the New World, he was hired as a hand to work the family farm of Samuel Sayre of Morristown in New Jersey. In exchange for his hog slopping and wood-chopping labors, LeBlanc was afforded a small room in the dank basement of the Sayre house, but no wages. He took his work orders from Mr. Sayre, his wife Sarah, and even the Sayre's household servant Phoebe, who is believed to have been a slave. Being the privileged son of a well-to-do European family, this arrangement probably did not sit too well with the 31-year-old LeBlanc. It was about 2 weeks after he first started his menial chores on the Sayre farm that LeBlanc decided that he could suffer the indignity no longer. He began to plan his revenge. On the night of May 11, LeBlanc returned to the Sayre house at about 10:30 p.m. after drinking at a local tavern. Faking distress, he summoned Samuel Sayre out to the stable, where he said that there was a problem with the horses. Carrying a candle, Mr. Sayre made his way out to the barn, where LeBlanc proceeded to smash in his employer's face with a shovel, splattering pieces of Sayre's brain all over his coat. The killer then repeated his ploy on Mrs. Sayre, finishing her off with a kick to the head from one of his heavy boots. After hiding the two bodies beneath a nearby pile of manure, LeBlanc made his way back to the main house, where he found Phoebe asleep in her bedroom on the second floor. LeBlanc then caved in the unsuspecting girl's skull with a single blow from a club. After his murderous spree, LeBlanc frantically stuffed whatever household valuables he could into pillowcases and set off down the road on one of the Sayre's horses. In his haste to escape the scene of the crime, he unknowingly left a trail of stolen booty in the roadway that would later mark his route. On the morning that followed, Louis Halsey, a Sayre family friend, discovered some personal effects in the road which bore the monogram of Samuel Sayre. Fearing a robbery had taken place, a group of townsfolk decided to search the Sayre property. After the grisly discovery of the 3 murdered victims, Sheriff George Ludlow set off in pursuit of the killer. When he caught up with him, LeBlanc was sipping cider in the Mosquito Tavern in the Hackensack Meadows, a pouch of Sayre's possessions by his side. According to his subsequent jail cell confession, LeBlanc had stopped to rest en route to New York, where he planned to board a ship bound for Germany. Upon spotting Sheriff Ludlow, LeBlanc bolted for the back door of the tavern, but was easily apprehended and transported back to Morristown for prosecution. The trial of Antoine LeBlanc for the murders of the Sayre family began in courtroom number 1 of the Morris County Courthouse on August 13, 1833. After being afforded all of the formalities of a fair hearing, a jury took 20 minutes to find the defendant guilty. The next day, Judge Gabriel Ford handed down the sentence. LeBlanc was to be hanged by the neck until dead, and then be delivered to Dr. Isaac Canfield, a surgeon, for dissection. On the afternoon of September 6th, LeBlanc stood atop the modern gallows erected on the village green for the occasion. This new device was designed to jerk the condemned man upward, rather than drop the floor out from beneath him like a conventional gallows. A crowd estimated at between 10 and 12,000 had descended upon Morristown, greatly outnumbering the local population, which was about 2,500 at the time. The jeering mob, many of whom carried bag lunches, made their way into tall trees and onto nearby rooftops to get a better view of the execution. When the counterweight dropped, LeBlanc shot up in the air about 8 feet. His body twitched for about 2 minutes at the end of the rope, and then was still. Just over 4 months after first setting foot on American soil, Antoine LeBlanc's life was ended. But the truly barbaric story that still haunts Morristown to this day was just about to begin. It seems the good, God-fearing Presbyterian townsfolk were not content to let this murderous scoundrel get off so easy with just a mere hanging. They had some other, more creative ideas of what to do with this monster. First, LeBlanc's lifeless body was taken down from the gallows and quickly transported across the street to Dr. Canfield's office. There, Doctors Canfield and Joseph Henry engaged in some unusual medical experiments, using LeBlanc as their unsuspecting test subject. By connecting the corpse to a rudimentary battery, the doctors aimed to validate a popular theory of the time that linked electrical currents to muscular impulses. While they were unable to bring the deceased back to life, Reports suggest that they managed to make LeBlanc's eyes roll, induce some tension in his limbs, and even prompt a faint smile on his lips. However, he was far from being Frankenstein's monster. After the good doctors had completed their efforts to advance medical science, a death mask likeness of LeBlanc's face was cast in plaster. Then it was time to carve him up. LeBlanc's skin was peeled off and dispatched to the Atno Tannery on Washington Street to be fashioned into a variety of charming little keepsakes. A large number of wallets, purses, lampshades, and book jackets were produced from the hair follicle-studded hide. Strips of skin were sold on the streets, each one personally signed by the Honorable Sheriff Ludlow to verify its authenticity. These gruesome little souvenirs reportedly found their way into many a respectable Morristown home, where, it is said, many still remain to this day. As the years passed, most of the residents of Morristown seemed content to let this dark episode of local justice slip quietly between the pages of the town's history. The story of Antoine LeBlanc, however, proved to be harder to kill than the man himself. Rumors concerning the whereabouts of LeBlanc's remains continued to circulate around the area long after the 1833 dissection. One such local legend was that Dr. Canfield had reassembled the executed man's skeleton to hang in his office. This myth was disproved, however, in 1893, when workers building an addition to the county clerk's office found LeBlanc's missing bones in a small wooden box in the bowels of the old building. Then on Halloween night 1995, a startling discovery was made, which confirmed many of the long-standing rumors concerning the survival of Antoine LeBlanc's epidermal artifacts in Morristown. While liquidating the estate of the late Carl Scherzer, workers from Dawson's Auctioneers and Appraisers of Morris Plains uncovered the glazed plaster death mask of Antoine LeBlanc stashed away in a box in Scherzer's basement. Soon after this grim discovery, a shriveled change purse made from what appeared to be human skin was found tucked away in an upstairs library of the same house. Scherzer, a retired surveyor and unofficial town historian, had evidently amassed quite a collection of 19th century artifacts during his lifetime. After his death in 1979, the chore of sorting through his museum-like house fell upon the shoulders of his son Douglas, who in turn called Dawson's. The death mask of Antoine LeBlanc, along with the skin accessories, were put on display in a glass case at Dawson's, but were not offered for bidding to the packed house at the November 18th auction. After the display was dismantled, the LeBlanc trinkets were returned to the custody of the surviving Scherzer. Madeleine Smith was born on 29th of March, 1835. Smith was the first child of 5 of an upper-middle-class family. Her father, James Smith, was a wealthy architect, and her mother, Elizabeth, was the daughter of leading neoclassical architect David Hamilton. She was born at the family home 81 Wellington Place in Glasgow. The family lived at their townhouse at 7 Blithwood Square, and also had a country retreat, Rowalyn, at Rue on the River Clyde near Helensburgh. She went to school in London between 1851 and 1853, and returned to Glasgow at the age of 18. In spring 1855, Madeleine met and fell in love with Pierre-Émile Langelier, an apprentice nurseryman originally from the Channel Islands. She was 20 and he was 29. The pair would meet late at night at Smith's bedroom window and also engaged in voluminous correspondence. During one of their infrequent meetings alone, she lost her virginity to Langelier. Madeleine's parents strictly forbade the relationship on grounds of his financial prospects and social background. But they continued to meet, and Madeleine wrote no fewer than 250 love letters to Langelier and promised to marry him. Meanwhile, things came to a head in 1857 when William Minnock, a successful businessman and neighbor of the Smiths, asked for Madeleine's hand in marriage. Both Madeleine and her family gladly accepted. It's speculated that Madeleine had started to realize that her relationship with Langelier couldn't last, and that she also found Minnock attractive. Trouble indeed. She wrote to Langelier in February 1857, breaking things off. He didn't take it well. Madeleine had asked him to return all the letters she had written to him, but he refused. It's believed he planned to use them to blackmail Madeleine into marrying him, so they continued meeting in secret. Madeleine started making visits to local chemists, purchasing arsenic. Her purchases were easy to track, as anyone buying poison was required to sign a poison book. Langelier was also partial to a little bit of arsenic, as he believed it helped with stomach problems. He regularly enjoyed receiving a late-night hot chocolate on his visits to Madeleine after her family had gone to bed. Then on 23rd of March 1857, Langelier died at his lodgings of what turned out to be arsenic poisoning. Upon hearing of Langelier's death, Madeleine tried to flee Glasgow. Minnoch found her and brought her back, but she refused to tell him and her family why she wanted to go. Meanwhile, police had found out about the affair with Langelier. The poison books at chemists in Glasgow indicated that Madeleine had been buying a lot of arsenic in recent weeks, and she was duly arrested on suspicion of murder. Her family and fiancé soon heard about her illicit relationship with Langelier, as did wider Glasgow society. Scandal was in the air. Under questioning, Madeleine admitted to the relationship with Langelier, writing him love letters and also agreeing to marry him. She also agreed she had purchased the arsenic, but claimed she lied when she told the chemist it was intended to kill rats. It was common in those days for women to use arsenic as a cosmetic, diluting it in water to improve their complexion. Madeleine was too embarrassed to say this is what she had planned to do. She denied having seen Langelier in the last 3 weeks of his life. This and the fact that Langelier was a habitual user of arsenic were seemingly put to one side, and Madeleine was charged with his murder. As the case generated high interest in Glasgow, the trial was moved to Edinburgh. It's safe to say it was the EastEnders of its day. The press was full of the salacious details of Madeleine and Langelier's affair, of which the public couldn't get enough, as well as the contents of the letters and details clandestine meetings. It also emerged that the pair had slept together, the ultimate Victorian stigma. The courtroom was packed during the 9-day trial, with people wanting to catch a glimpse of Madeleine. In the end, the jury returned the verdict of not proven, which is found only in Scots law. Essentially, it means that a jury is not entirely convinced of an accused's guilt, but equally that they aren't convinced of their innocence. To this day, no one can say for sure if Madeleine actually committed the crime or if she was the victim of bad luck and a vindictive, spurned lover. Following the trial, she was freed, but her life was in tatters. Following the scandal, her family were forced to quit their Glasgow home and their country villa Rowland in Rue and moved to Bridge of Allan in central Scotland. They moved again in 1860 to Old Polmont. Her father died in Polmont in 1863, aged 55, broken by the whole affair. On the 4th of July, 1861, she married an artist named George Wardle, William Morris's business manager. They had one son, Thomas, who was born in 1864, and one daughter, Mary, called Kitten, born in 1863. For a time, she became involved with the Fabian Society in London and was an enthusiastic organizer. As she was known by her new married name, not everyone knew who she was, but a few did. After many years of marriage, she and her husband separated in 1889, and Madeleine moved to New York City. Around 1916, then 75, she married 49-year-old William A. Sheehy, and this marriage lasted until his death in 1926. Various theories abound as to exactly what led to Langelier's death. It also left a spooky imprint. The former Smith townhouse in Blithswood Square is now an office, reputedly haunted, whilst Langelier's apparition has been reportedly witnessed sauntering along Sauchiehall Street, cane in hand. The murder of Graeme Thorne. Graeme Frederick Hilton Thorne was born on 18 December 1951 in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Graeme Thorne was an 8-year-old who was kidnapped and murdered in 1960. On July 7, 1960, the Scots College student became the victim of Australia's first kidnap for ransom plot. The eldest of Basil and Frida Thorne's 2 children, he vanished after leaving the family flat in Edward Street, Bondi, at 8:30 a.m. on a Thursday. Graeme was to wait nearby on Wellington and O'Brien Streets, where family friend Phyllis Smith routinely picked him up to take him to school, along with her 2 sons in Bellevue Hill. When Graeme was not there on July 7th, Smith drove to the Thorne home to check if he was attending school. His mother, at home with daughter Belinda, then 3, confirmed he was to go to school and wondered if he had already arrived. Smith drove to Scots College, but Graeme was not there. Leaving her own sons at school, she returned to the Thorne home, where Graeme's worried mother rang Sergeant Larry O'Shea at nearby Bondi Police Station. At 9:40 a.m., his mother received a call. She was told, "I have your son." O'Shea took the phone and pretended to be Basil Thorne when the kidnapper demanded payment of £25,000 before 5 p.m. "If you don't get the money," he threatened, "I'll feed the boy to the sharks." O'Shea expressed doubt that he could get hold of the large sum, apparently unaware of extensive media coverage about Basil Thorne's £100,000 win in the Opera House lottery on June 1st. Media reports on the large win in the 10th lottery draw included the Thornes' names and address and revealed that the Bondi traveling salesman would receive his prize by July 7th. The kidnapper phoned the Thorne home again at 9:47 p.m. when a different police officer answered. The kidnapper gave instructions that the money was to be put in 2 paper bags, but hung up abruptly without leaving further instructions. Police searched every house and flat around the Thornes' ground floor home unit within hours, expanding to cover motels, boarding houses, and boat moorings around Sydney Harbor. Police Commissioner Colin Delaney appealed for Graeme's return on evening television when his father briefly appeared to plead, "For God's sake, send him back to me in one piece." Graeme's empty school case was found at 6 p.m. on July 8th in the bush near the Wakehurst Parkway. His school cap, lunch bag, and school books were found 1.5 kilometers away on July 11th. Then came the find his family dreaded. The body of a boy, believed to be that of kidnapped Bondi schoolboy Graeme Thorne, was found today, tied with cords on a vacant scrub-covered block of land at Seaforth, newspapers reported on August 16th. Children had seen a blue tartan rug in Grandview Grove, Seaforth, sometime earlier. Graeme was found, with his necktie as his mother had tied it for school, and his coat still buttoned. Forensic analysis found 2 types of cypress foliage on his coat, pants, and a scarf tied around his neck. Soil samples also showed minute fragments of a pink-colored substance chemically identified as limestone mortar. A police search for a house with shrubs and pink limestone mortar led to Moore Street, Clontarf, about 3 kilometers from where Graeme's body was found. Hungarian migrant Stephen Leslie Bradley, his wife, and their 3 children had recently moved out. Bradley also owned a blue sedan seen near the Thorne home on July 7th. By the time police were ready to charge Bradley, he had sailed for Britain on September 26th. Police apprehended Bradley at Colombo on October 10th. At Bradley's 9-day trial, police claimed Graeme likely died from head injuries on the day he disappeared. Bradley was sentenced to life imprisonment. He died in jail at age 42 on October 6, 1968.